Hey guys, part 2 to my lactic acid beef processing video. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly suggest you go watch it. There are timestamps in the video, there will be timestamps in this video, but now I want to jump into the laws, regulations, the mandates, the studies of these acids and how they've been just constantly just injected more and more in our food, the data behind E. coli versus digestive issues, and so on. So stay tuned. Let's dive in. From my research, it looks like they have used some outbreak that happened in 1993 of E. coli to start lobbying. In 1994, they started showing how lactic acid is effective, and how people die from foodborne illnesses and so on and so forth. There's so much annual cost, as if they care, because that's money in their pockets, in certain people's pockets. But 1994 is when they started advocating for this stuff, and it looks like 1996 is when, in July 1996, mandating all USDA inspected meat and poultry establishment implement this system. So USDA basically published this HACCP system and mandated the use of it, of these organic processing aids. And I'll go over these processing aids and how they've classified everything so that they don't have to actually disclose it in your ingredient list. In the last video, I showed this list. I asked USDA to send me of things that they are not requiring to be labeled, and all of these acids are basically not required to label, as you can see in this column. And this is a very large document, 76 pages. But if we go here, if I click on this mandate, it takes me to a 184-page document. This is what I mean. Do we really think these people, before signing, sat there and read all of this 184 pages? I personally doubt that. And again, it goes back to, they're either doesn't matter because they knew they're going to sign it regardless. It's corruption, and it's intentional, or they're just lazy zombies who just, they're human. So not everybody who goes to work and puts in 8 hours to get their job done is eager and curious to read and understand whether they're doing the right thing or not. As you can see in this particular document, examples of ingredients. So first, at the very first draft, they had ingredients as mold inhibitors. They had put these acids, Aspergillus, the mold, as well as citric acid, malic acid, and all these acids as ingredients. Later, you notice that they wanted to change that, and instead of calling it a ingredient, they wanted to call that a processing aid so that they don't have to label it. So they draft this document talking about how these acids decrease E. coli, and then they go over and say that secondary direct food additives provide a momentary technical effect and not a lasting effort in the treated food. These substances are ordinarily removed from the final food. This is going to be very important in a moment. And any residuals that may carry over to the final product are not expected to exhibit any technical effect. Therefore, they would be considered processing aids under FDA's definition of that term. There is no lasting functional effect, and there is an insignificant amount present in the finished product under the processed conditions of use. Just watch how the studies disprove this. And this is a lie. And the studies they keep conducting does not support that claim that there are no lasting functional effects. In fact, it's the complete opposite of that. So they're using that to say if a substance is a processing aid, it need not be declared in the ingredient statement, nor need there be provision for its use in any standard of identity that is applicable to the finished food. If these are organic acids that are good for you, why does it matter? Why disclose versus not? Like, you can just disclose it. What's the deal? What's the deal here? To go back to this document, I want to quickly mention this part. These acids, like you can see the organic acid, organic acid, organic acid. This is the part I wanted to show. While biological hazards are of great chemical hazards, while biological hazards are of great concern because contaminated food can cause widespread illness outbreaks, chemical hazards may also cause foodborne illnesses, although generally affecting fewer people. Based on what? Based on what studies are you saying that? It's talking, it has to obviously mention a little bit, right? Because, but it doesn't give you any studies or sources as to why do you think that is a true statement. And chemical hazards can originate from 4 general sources: agriculture chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, animal drugs, fertilizers. This is a huge misperception. When I keep talking about how we keep missing the mark and are outraged for the wrong thing, is because our attention has constantly been split and directed towards the wrong thing. Hey, shiny object, go there. They want us to be outraged about something, and they use people to kind of like, you know, when you those toys when you just turn the key and oh my god, what's the word? You turn the key and then you put it and it just goes whichever direction you put. That's like what they've done to people. Pesticides and fertilizers are essential tools for farming. Yes, there are good and bad pesticides and fertilizers, but it has been like, when you look in the industry, there's this constant talk about how pesticides and the fertilizers are the issue and the bad guys, and most people who want to go into organic food, they just really focus on this pesticides and herbicides, and that is or pesticides and fertilizers, and that is inaccurate. If anyone who has farmed, you know that you cannot have a farm without pesticides. When pests come to your farm and you do not deal with them, you will not have a farm the next day, okay? You need pesticides and fertilizers to sustain a farm. So this is yet another misperception to force people to go another way. Another misperception is all these acids and how they're organic, and how people have lost sight of what's actually organic occurring versus non-organically occurring. All these doctors are constantly coming up with diets and eliminating everything until you're left with nothing to eat, instead of understanding that, again, there's one layer down, there's a very solid base of common denominator that would do well, that would help everyone if we just eliminate that one thing. So, and then of course it just goes into all of these things that are definitely less harmful than the very thing you're consuming in your daily food, which are these food additives, preservatives, these acids. This is how these people work. Moving on, let's talk about their constant claims of foodborne illnesses, okay? So what I'm going to do is look up first the last 2 decades. This is actually on the last 2 decades. From 2020 to 2022, in 2 decades, 687 people have died from foodborne illnesses. Yes, there are lots of illnesses. I mean, you get a tummy ache, food poisoning, that's your foodborne illness. Okay, you go to a doctor, you have a tummy ache, and you're prescribed something, and you become a data point here. However, we can see how little that impacts death. 687 in 2 decades. This number here, 2 million, that is the number. Let me redo so you can see it for yourself. It's going to take a second. But that is, let's take the same 2 decades, 2000 to 2020, and I'm not even going to highlight gazillion diseases that I think are there because of these acids. I'm just going to select digestive issues because digestive, that's simple. It's your digestive tract. It has to do with the food you're digesting. That's what goes through that system, right? So just that. 2 million people in the last 2 decades have died of digestive issues. 2 million versus 687. If you want to have the argument, they're putting all these efforts in place, that's why the number is low. Actually, no, because if I go to 1971, which is all the data they have, all the way to 2020, the total is 1,042. And if you go before they start lobbying, so 1994 is when they started lobbying, you have 296 deaths from 1971 to 1994. And if you want to look at a single year, okay, 1993 is what was the big deal apparently. You have 64 deaths. So this number, these illnesses, these tummy aches, these food poisons, they're not pleasant. I'm not saying it's pleasant. But that, with only 64 dead, caused this. Do I think that these people just simply reacted and wanted to find a solution? I would like to think that. I don't, because they're struggling to prove that through their papers. Generally recognized as safe. And if we want to talk about globally, let's actually look at that too, because that also puts things in perspective. In 2006, 155,000 people died of E. coli and Salmonella. Okay? This is published by WHO. Oops. When you look at this, you realize that Asia is responsible for almost 138,000 of it. Out of the 155,000, Asia has the 138,000 of the deaths. This is not comparable to US and Western worlds, because in US and Western worlds, our processes look more or less, our centers, we have technology, centers, units, our sanitation is not the same as Asia. So this is our sanitation.
Trimming the carcass to remove any visible contamination. Thoroughly washing the carcass with potable warm water.
By the way, that warm water is what kills the pathogen. I'll go into that.
Applying an antimicrobial spray on the carcass surface to reduce bacteria.
And that's your poison, which is unnecessary.
And finally, chilling the carcass as quickly as possible.
So that's more or less what the technologies we use in Western world. Forget about the acid spray for a moment, even just the sanitation, the locations, the tools, right? The care. Whereas when you're talking about Asia, they have wet markets. There are things that looks like this in Asia. Like that. Like that. Okay? I don't know. Is that a chicken in the air? Whatever's going on in this mess. I mean, Look at this. So, and of course, they also eat all that, which is coming to your plate soon. But we can't compare this with the Western worlds and use this as if there's some, as if they're comparable. So if you take out 138,000 of it, there's only a little bit left underneath. And when you look at continents or regions like North Africa and Middle East, just 900 deaths. For a region that's poor and isn't necessarily known for westernized technologies, although Middle East is not really poor, they have a lot of oil, 900 is not bad. Africa is obviously a poor continent. Central, East, South, West Africa, just 4,100 deaths. And these are all returning travelers too. So then, So basically, you can see the point I'm trying to make. It is absolutely unnecessary to use E. coli as a, reason to poison our food. By the way, they're not happy enough with beef. They really want to bring this to kangaroos, game, and wild goats too. This was drafted in 2022, so most likely it's going to be approved, and goats, sheep, and so on are going to be affected. It's absolutely disgusting. They go over how, of course, WHO is fine with it, and EU is fine with it, USDA is fine with it, so we should bring this to light. In Singapore, lactic acid solutions not exceeding 2.5% are permitted. In this original paper, you can see how it mentions actually that toxicological effects if limits exceed. So over here, they have talked about, how you should not allow the limits to exceed, but then of course they threw that all out the window and went for more and more. They want to bring this to your game meats because they haven't made enough money. I will get you the market size for lactic acid, citric acid, and I guess I'll just tell you, you can look this up yourself, but for citric acid, it's about 4.2 billion right now, and they want to increase that, pretty much double it by 2030. Same with lactic acid. Currently, it's right around 3.3-ish billion, and they want to double that by 2030. Acetic acid, same. Well, this is the largest one because vinegar is the largest one, and that's a 22-ish billion market size currently, and they really want to increase that by a lot by 2030 as well. So that's why they will lobby this crap into just about everything. So they want to bring this to your wild pigs and goats and sheep and kangaroos. This is put out there by the Australian government. As I have mentioned either earlier in this video or maybe my last video, it's been a couple of hours I'm shooting now, so I might break this up into 2 videos. All of these, it really doesn't matter where does it start, because that Codex Commission is what decides, and if it decides, then it just trickles down to everybody. Have people become so detached from everything that they don't say like, okay, let's see, why do you think this is a good idea? Because this is foodborne disease outbreaks, 2017. You can see dairy is 14, beef is 19, pork is 13, and chicken is 23. Even those, of course, we will talk about in a little bit. However, your other meat, sheep, goat, 2, game, 1. Game includes deer, bison, kangaroo, just about everything that we don't eat. It's not as commonly used. This is how corrupt it is. They're just wanting to go even after every single last thing that you consume. They don't want anything organic to be left in your food. And it's not helpful that I came across this. We already have heard how constantly they just keep shoving crickets on our faces. cricket protein, cricket food. Celebrities are displaying how yummy crickets are. So they're basically really desperately trying to bring this kind of protein to our diets and make do with cows. If one day I feel like it, I might make a video on just that alone, because, just you can see Bill Gates constantly talking about how in the future we're not going to be eating red meat. It will be, you will like what you're eating. It will be fine. It will be lab made. And look at this. This is the USDA website. I actually want to point something out on USDA website. Look at this. This is their homepage. Our priorities: advancing racial justice, equity, and opportunity, addressing climate change, tackling food and nutrition insecurities. So out of 4 priorities, this is your Food and Drug Administration. No, I'm sorry. This is the Agriculture Department. This is just your food. This is USDA. And out of their 4 top priorities, 2 are advancing racial justice and addressing climate change. Not like food regulation, help to farmers, blah, blah, blah. Just all 4 of these priorities should have been food related, not advancing racial justice or tackling climate change. Jesus Christ, these people. This is their site, USDA. Human food made with cultured animal cells. We're not eating enough poison. This is the future. The ability to take a small number of cells from living animals and grow them in controlled environments, ferment them in a lab, to create food in an emerging area of food science. Advancements in cell culture technology enable scientists to use animal cells obtained from livestock, poultry, or seafood to produce food products. I'm not going to go into this, but this is just absolutely disgusting. These people have just never, there's zero interest in human health or human life. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go to this document real quick, how they are talking about salmonella is bad, so we need to obviously make sure that we use lactic acid, and we should not label it because there is no lasting functional effects. Okay, there's no lactic acid that transfers into the final product. Now check this out. So intervention guidelines, of course, the top regular ones: lactic acid, acetic acid, fresh boom, which is a combination of citric and lactic and other acids. There's also a thing called Bifside, is blend of lactic acid and citric acid. So there's the Bifside, and then there is the fresh boom. Those are commonly used, but then on top of the rest of them, right? Hot water rinse, dry aging. So back to lasting effects on food. Check this out. UW in-plant test found a 1.2 log reduction in total bacteria due to the final carcass wash. A 0.6 log additional reduction from the wash through day 2 of aging. 0.4 log additional reduction through day 6 of aging. So basically 2.2 log from before carcass wash through 6 days of aging. What does that suggest? That suggests that as time passes, lactic acid absorbs and sips in. That's why the logs increase. I love that at least accidentally in one instance, they called it for what it is. Lactic acid is the most commonly used antibacterial chemical treatment used for carcasses. At least in one place, I think they slipped up and they used it, the correct word. And I love this language next to each other. There have been reports of acetic acid solutions being harder on floors, eats them up. Right underneath, one industry newsletter reported some processors were finding that carcasses sprayed with organic acids developed changes in the surface fat during aging. To date, we have not heard of anything like that from local processors. So these acids, not only you just mentioned how it keeps aging and it keeps increasing the count, which means it's doing something to the meat. You also just said how it's hard on floors and it eats them up, but you've never heard that it could potentially, I mean, this is beef carcass. It's not hardwood floors or concrete that it's eroding. I mean, are people not using any analytical skills anymore? And look at this. These are their own studies. And when I say their own, they use a plant or a university and they just run these studies. Look at this. Lactic acid spray, 1% acid, just 1.0 log. 5% acid, 2.6 log. So higher the number, more E. coli supposedly it kills, right? Now check this out. Hot water wash at 165 degrees. Same as 5% lactic acid, and a little bit hotter water, 203 degree Fahrenheit, 4.0 log. That is effective. Combined with infrastructures in place we have in United States, this is a non-issue. I'm not going to click on every single picture, but you can see the technology, the cleanliness, the sanitation is used here in US. Needless to say, that hot water that absolutely kills the pathogen way better than your acid. Your own study. In this document, it's making its case, and this is, I think, this is 2000. This one that I just mentioned, this is 2003. This one is 2016, and this is 2020, I believe. So this is in 1994. It's talking back about an incident in 1994 where they dipped steaks in acetic or lactic acid at 0.6% or 1.2% for either 20 or 120 seconds. So what they found is basically, however, by day 9 of retail display, 1.2% lactic acid dipped for 120 seconds had the greatest difference between the untreated log at 1.7 log. So to sum it up, your treated meat after 9 days of retail display, the logs increased. Whereas in this paper, they are making the case that these are momentary technical effects and not a lasting effect in the treated food. That is bullshit, because when you spray the meat, then you hang it for X amount of days, it just keeps eating into the meat, and then you consume that. The purpose of this study was to test the effectiveness of 4.5% lactic acid, 2.5% beef side, and 380 ppm this other acid. So basically, imagine it's not even just one acid at a single percentage. It's the concoction, this cocktail. Oh my God. No wonder America is the unhealthiest country in the world. The 2020 paper, again, I'll point it to the excessive use of organic acids. Look at that, look at that, look at that. Very organic. Then, again, studies, the same way, the logs, intervention, lactic acid, 1 to 5, okay? That's extremely unstable. You don't want it to be, well, it could be 1 or it could be 5. I'm assuming if you age 128 days, it can reach 5, because now you have left nothing in the beef that's beef nutrient anymore. It has eaten up the entire thing. Citric acid, 1.5 to 2.3 log. Hot water, 3 to 4. That is stable, consistent way to kill this bacteria. Hot water, 3 to 4. 3 to 4. Not 1 to 4, not 0 to 4. 3 to 4. stable way of doing this. I love how they just keep contradicting things. Lactic acid had become of great interest because of their effectiveness against E. coli. Use of lactic acid during the pre-evisceration process showed reduction between 1 to 1.6 logs of aerobic bacteria of E. coli. Application of lactic acid at the end of the slaughter process in worm carcasses reduces the concentration of E. coli between 0.5 to 1.8 log on beef carcasses. However, under laboratory condition, it has been reported that lactic acid reduces E. coli by 1 to more than 4.8 log. So in real plants, they don't see this. They see very small, 1.8, 1.6, very small numbers. In a lab condition, they see higher, but not in practice. In addition, other studies had reported the non-effectiveness of lactic acid application. Intervention of lactic acid 2% concentration demonstrated no significant difference in the reduction of bacteria in cooled carcasses. However, substantial reduction were obtained in concentration of 4%. So they want to go up the percentage. The effort of lactic acid against microorganisms depends on the time of exposure, and their bacterial action increases with the time after their application. Yet again, no lasting effect. So we're not going to call this an ingredient. We're going to call this a processing aid because there's no lasting effect. There's your lasting effect. It increases with time. There was another very important thing that I had discovered here. Where is it? Here, I found it. This was very interesting as well. So this other study did not measure microbial count directly, but found that odors released by spoilage organisms were reduced with the application of lactic acid. Let me read that again. Odors released by spoilage organisms were reduced with lactic acid. It's not that your beef stops spoiling, but it blocks the odor. You could be buying and consuming spoiled meat, but you cannot smell to assess whether it's good or bad. It blocks the odor that the spoilage organisms release. That is also foul and damning. And no wonder, actually, when you think about, because I was thinking about like the guts on these people, they lobby and they increase the usage and so on and so forth. But if you compare before 1994, so from 1970 to 1994 versus 1994 to 2020, definitely far more illnesses and far more deaths have happened. And instead of looking at that and saying, let's zoom out and let's discuss whether we're on the right track, we're just full blown only looking at what we did last year and just doubling down. All right, that concludes part 2. I hope it was useful. I hope you share with someone who may need and find it also beneficial. And I'll talk to you guys next time. I'll go over something called clean labels. And